Welcome to the pre-lecture for week 5 of Industrial Ecology Fall 2018. I'm Joshua Skov. There will be a pop quiz. Here's your hint. Not saying any more right now. I will have a quick note on urban mobility. A couple of you looked incredulous after class as we talked about these things on Monday and Wednesday last week. Really? Will cars go away? Will parking really show up in a huge surplus as a result? Well, I just want to point out this piece already from 2 whole years ago, as of last week, from Denver. Note this: Denver developers have seen the future of parking, and it is no parking at all. Look at that paragraph I've boldfaced. They're planning today for a future with less demand for parking and building parking that can be repurposed. So I think it's an interesting thing to note. Who knows how fast these changes will happen, but looks like they'll happen at least to some extent. So a quick overview of the week, mainly IoT and related themes. I'll just do some bits of IoT. Get it? Bits? Anyway, so we'll look at a few sectors, just a little bit on transportation, a piece on industry and manufacturing, and then some health and healthcare topics. I want you to grapple with some of the cross-cutting concepts as well. You're going to see big data, analytics, machine learning, and AI show up in all of these themes to some extent or another. And then also just this very simple notion of the large-scale deployment of small things. I'll use the word distributed a couple of times as well, and we'll do some in-class project work. So what is IoT? Let me spend just a little bit of time introducing this. So I think this definition is helpful. The Internet of Things connects devices to a network to achieve benefits. Now, notice how I skipped most of that stuff. But the reason I did is that I want you to focus on that basic idea. We can talk in class about what the objects are. We can talk about how we achieve these different benefits. What exactly is the network in different cases? Though we're going to mean the net in a lot of places. But I'll want you to think about that very general idea and then different flavors of it. So note the parallel with elements of industrial ecology as you've heard it, this different constellation of technologies and business models, and then surely flows of energy, materials, and more than anything, information through parts of the economic system. So a few different facets of this from a very high level, but really try to hold these with you as you look at these different examples. We want to see the Internet of Things as an opportunity for economic and social benefit. We definitely want to see it as a source of resource efficiency for existing products and services and for the new stuff. And of course, it'll be an area of innovation and a facilitator of new business models, but it might also be potentially spooky with some dangers to look out for, and we'll try to touch on those as we go. I'll have more of this in class, more to say on this slide, but just look at the top 3 sub-bullets there. Pipes, apps, things. I want you to think about the pipes, the actual infrastructure of connectivity. Easy to take this for granted at any moment in time. You have Wi-Fi, you have cellular, there are sensors all over the place, but actually that infrastructure is a big deal and is definitely changing. Also the apps, so I just mentioned the hardware, the apps are the software, delivering results with that hardware. And then the things, what are the actual things that are connected? And both the things and then the whole groups of things. And we'll talk more about that in class. So let me take a moment on this delicious infographic from IBM. Given how serious that company seems most of the time, this is kind of a funny, colorful, cartoony graphic, but it does demonstrate a few things. Note for them here, it's from the angle of big data. I'll want you to see big data and the Internet of Things as two sides of the same coin for the most part. But I also want you to see that there are ways to describe the way big data is emerging. The volume, well, yeah, we call it big for a reason. And by big, I don't mean like more rows of Excel than can fit on your screen. I'm talking about more rows than can fit in Excel, and often by several orders of magnitude. And velocity, the speed at which these things are happening. You see the graphic of a car there, connected vehicles. are clearly one of the major sources of new big data. And variety, I want you to think about not just different sources, but quite different forms. So some of the data will be highly structured, simple quantitative data like latitude and longitude. Some of it will be much more qualitative or complex. You see video referenced there. And then some of it is totally unstructured data. You see the reference to tweets. And I think we know those can be pretty unstructured. And then in the lower right-hand corner, veracity. This is a big deal. I'll give a quick example in class of a screwy GPS reading that I got via an Internet of Things application. More on that later, but it is important to ask, when you're amassing data, how do you actually make sure it's, for the most part, true? How do you do quality control on those things as you go? It's a big part of this field as well. So that's what you see from IBM. Goldman Sachs has this slightly different take. I don't know why they couldn't use color. A couple of reasons this diagram is helpful, and then I'll talk for a moment about why they struggled here a little bit. It shows things at different spatial scale, and I think that's helpful. You see all the way down at the level of a Fitbit or an Apple Watch and wearables, all the way up to big systems and the outermost circle. So that breadth of applications and these different scales, I think, are important to think about. We'll talk in class about why the diagram's a little bit problematic. Some of it's ambiguous, some of it's sort of vague and hard to imagine, and there's no call out for the benefits. And that's why we'll look at a few examples ourselves in class. So the first thing we'll look at is healthcare. I really will want you to ponder these different examples. I've given you a bundle of little things to read and some videos to watch. I am not a paid representative of Apple. I'm simply using their materials this week because they do such a good job of laying out the value proposition and the visceral benefits of deploying their technologies in particular ways. So I think it's worth taking a little bit of time there. So a few things on healthcare, just to frame that up. First of all, I do want to get your reactions to it. So I will push you early in class to tell me how that stuff made you feel and what it made you think. Each of us has such a different experience based on life history and circumstances and the people in your life who've had to deal with major health issues. We all have different angles on the healthcare system, and it's important, I think, to get a bunch of that out. I notice some of this is quite frankly correlated with age. So because I am ancient and decrepit, I may have some additional insights, and of course far fewer than older people perhaps in your lives. So it'll be important just to get some of those reactions on the table. But we'll also try to level things up and get on the same page by looking at the components. What are the devices that we're actually talking about connecting? What are the different processes, and from a company standpoint, the workflow here? And then what are the bigger systems that we're talking about? It's interesting to think about one Apple Watch. What do you do when you deploy 1,000 of them? What opportunities are there when you deploy 10 million of them? So we'll think about those issues. What is the different industrial ecology here? What are the different relationships and the different moving parts? And then what are the efficiencies and the improvements? And I want you to think about the new things that can happen. You see some of that in these videos. What are the new things that can happen as a result of these technologies? But also, what are the economies of scale and deployment of distributed devices? What do you get out of having all of that information? How does it change the system as a whole? And of course, we will spend some time asking about who benefits. Are people healthier? If there are financial savings, who gets them? If there are other non-financial benefits, to whom do those accrue? And does the distribution of all this feel fair? We won't answer that conclusively, but I do think it's important to pick away at all of these pieces. And finally here, under who benefits, are these solutions relevant very broadly, or are they just for a lucky few? Sometimes it can start as one and become the other, but I want you to think about that. And some of it's easy to dismiss. when people are wearing fancy, expensive wearables, but maybe there's a bigger story there that we can talk about. And if we get the chance, I hope we can pull all the way back to this question. What is the difference between health and healthcare or health insurance? And does it matter for how we analyze these cases? I think in the United States especially, because not everybody has healthcare, there's very little continuity of healthcare throughout someone's life, continuity or security often. It's easy to overly focus on the availability of health insurance. And that may be an artifact of the American economy. An important piece of it, to be sure, for the foreseeable future, but also something that may distort how we think and feel about these things. So I will also have you listen to this little piece from Jeannie Rometty, the CEO of IBM, and thinking about technology and healthcare. Just a few comments on this now, and then I think it'll mainly speak for itself. I want you to note what she says about digital and how IBM is distinguishing itself from other companies. I want you to grasp to the best of your ability what she means by cognitive. I don't see other companies using it this way. They say other things, but I want to make sure we know what she means by cognitive and how it's part of their business strategy. And then I think this is easy, but the relevance to healthcare is there. A lot of data, mostly unstructured, and I'll say more about that in class. And then see where she positions the role of cognitive in the future of healthcare. It's actually quite stunning, I think. And we'll look at GE's notion of digital resource productivity. Just a few notes here, and then this little pamphlet almost. It's somewhere between a think piece, a white paper, and honestly, a marketing brochure. But I want you to ask just a few questions about it. See how GE sets itself and its notion of digital resource productivity in a bigger picture, using scale quite a bit. There are a lot of numbers in here. I think it's okay to note how self-serving this is for GE. It's as if all of the opportunities for digital resource productivity are really just about the company itself and its offerings. But also note the diverse nature of the opportunity. I don't know if it's coherent. I'm curious to hear that from you. But I want you to dig in and ask that question. Like, does this hang together? Is this notion of digital resource productivity a helpful one? And our final example will be from transportation. We're going to look at this page from INRIX. I may do one other transportation example in class. But I want you to see where IoT, big data, and transportation come together. INRIX is one of the world's big providers of connected vehicle data, and I'll say a little more about them in class. So I'll give a bit of context for big data and transportation. There's a lot of this data now showing up, and I will also want you to consider this INRIX example. It's a short page. It's actually a press release, if you note that. But I want you to see the benefit that's being drawn out here, and I want you to ask yourself, who exactly benefits from this technology? We'll ask some even deeper questions in class as well. That is it. Slightly shorter one today, but I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Wednesday. Thank you.